Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and one of the things we enjoy doing most on L'Chaim is simply introducing you to interesting, creative men and women who are making their own very special contribution to Jewish life, Jewish community, and to the Jewish people. So I'm so pleased to be sitting with a young man who's been on a most amazing personal journey. Growing up in a Mormon family, being part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, becoming aware that he was gay, and at some point realizing that being Jewish was at his core, and therefore he chose to convert to Judaism to become a Jew. His journey is the subject of a fascinating documentary entitled Latter-day Jew. Here's a very brief moment from that documentary.
My body is not a wonderland. It's more like a Kathy Bates character.
That's me, H. Alan Scott. So here's the deal. I was raised Mormon, poor, in the Midwest, turned out kinda gay, got a little cancer, then converted to Judaism. Try fitting all that onto a Tinder profile.
It is my pleasure to introduce you to H. Alan Scott, who in addition to being a brilliant writer, comedian based in LA, is the star of the documentary Latter-day Jew. It is so lovely to have you here.
Thank you for having me. That setup was so great. It's almost like it's not me.
It is you.
It's me, but
Yes.
it sounds great. I'm glad it's me.
Congratulations on being you.
Thank you.
It is amazing.
It's the only thing I do well.
We should all be able to say that,
Yeah,
H. Alan.
yeah.
You know? So I read your story. I see the clip from the movie, from the documentary, and there are only a million questions I have for you.
That's pretty typical for Jews.
Good.
Yeah.
I want to begin at the beginning. Tell me, you grew up where?
Missouri.
Okay.
So Mormons, people often ask, are you from Utah?
Yeah, everybody assumes we're from
but
Salt Lake.
The history of Mormonism is a little bit more interesting than that. It started in Rochester, New York, and then they went to Missouri, at Jackson County, Missouri, where my family's from, and then they went to Utah. And my family is the Missouri part of that. So we go back that far.
Brigham Young, by the way, brings the community to Utah. Is there
Yes.
any distinction between the Mormon community of Missouri and Utah because Brigham Young is associated with Utah?
Well, because Brigham Young came after Joseph Smith.
Correct.
So Joseph Smith brought Mormonism from Rochester, outside Rochester, New York, to Jackson County, Missouri. He got into some trouble in Missouri, and he famously was banned from Missouri, and Mormons were banned from Missouri. And then he came back, and the details are murky, you know, history. And then he was killed. And then Brigham Young took over and was like, we got to get out of Missouri. And then they went to Utah, and Brigham Young made him really famous in Utah.
Okay, but is there a difference between Missouri Mormonism and
There
Utah?
really isn't, no.
Okay.
They're very similar. I mean, I think maybe, I don't know that many Utah Mormons. I'm sure they probably think they're better than Missouri Mormons, but I bet a lot of Missouri Mormons will gladly arm wrestle a Utah Mormon and be like, I'm better.
So here you are growing up in Missouri, what town?
St. Louis.
St. Louis.
Outside St. Louis, Kirkwood, Missouri.
Okay. And what was your family like? Are you, first of all, mother, father, siblings?
Yeah, so my parents separated when I was really young, and it was my mother and my stepfather and my 3 brothers, but I have a lot of other step and half siblings. We were bad Mormons from the beginning.
Bad Mormons? In
well,
what
bad
way?
Mormons in that we weren't bad Mormons. My mom was a very good Mormon, but that my mom always joked that we were too poor to be conservative, so we were very working class and very. My mom always sort of, just like me, sort of went to the beat of her own drum, and she got out of a really bad marriage with my father and found the love of her life in my stepfather, who's been an amazing father.
What's your mother's name?
And Kathleen.
Kathleen.
Yeah. And she steals the movie. She's the star, which pisses me off.
And you grew up with how many siblings?
3 siblings.
Okay.
3 brothers.
You grew up in a Mormon home.
Yeah.
What's that? Jews have no idea.
Yeah.
H. Allen, what is that like?
Well, there's lots of Jell-O.
Is that true?
We love Jell-O. I don't. Maybe it's just my family, but I have a feeling Mormons love Jell-O. And I mean, it's pretty standard, except that Mormonism is, like Judaism, it's a community in and of itself, and they kind of base a lot of like the life practices of Jewish life is also very similar to Mormon life in that everything kind of revolves around, in their case, the church, and Jewish life, the temple, and there's activities throughout the week, and the kids go to like classes for baptism and then later for missionary work. And
this is what happened that you did this.
I didn't do missionary work, but I did the baptism classes and stuff.
And how often did you go to Mormon church?
Well, a couple times a week.
Really?
Yeah. When I was a kid, because I was in classes, and then, of course, on Sundays. And church services were always very long, and they would have one main service, and then we would separate, and then we would come back together. I mean, I was always sort of like screwing around and doing bad things, so my memory on how long the actual service, maybe it was actually just very short, and I thought it was long because I was a kid. But it was very normal to me. And I think it was very normal. I don't know any other experience, so it was normal.
Was Mormon identity, as you were growing up, central to not only your family but to you?
The groundwork of Mormonism was very central to my mother. It was very important for my mom to have all of her kids be baptized Mormon. She didn't necessarily think we had to go to church every Sunday or she wasn't completely devout. She wasn't leading groups at church and stuff because she was too busy working, But she did the foundations because she comes from a Mormon family. She is Mormon. That's her foundation. That's her identity. And so she wanted to raise her kids in that way, while at the same time going against the church by recognizing, in my case, that I never could be anything but gay. I was always very gay. And it was very obvious from a very young age that I was different from the rest of my brothers. And my mom never tried to stop that. She never tried to change that because she felt it was authentically me. And she didn't want to alter who is authentically me. And so she didn't necessarily go against the church. She just did her own thing, which I, of course, did as well later in life.
So you were lucky to have a remarkable mother.
My mom's amazing.
Yes.
She's definitely an example of how to be a great mom.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
In the Jewish world, Jewish community, it was during my lifetime that there was a sea change in how mainstream Judaism, even within the Orthodox world, but certainly outside the Orthodox world, viewed gay homosexuality.
Yeah.
And at one point, if you were gay, you weren't allowed into rabbinical school, and rabbis wouldn't marry you. And again, still within the Orthodox world, there is a feeling that while the gay Jew should not be shunned and should be welcomed in the community, certainly in modern Orthodoxy, there's certainly still a feeling that gay lifestyle is not to be promulgated or even given sanction within the Jewish world. Yeah. What was it like in the Mormon community?
It definitely wasn't applauded. It wasn't encouraged. And my mom actually recently remembered a moment when we were kids, when I was a kid, that conversion therapy is a big thing, especially within Mormonism, but within sort of evangelical Christian, and I'm sure even in Hasidic communities within the Jewish community. And the idea of changing someone's sexual orientation. And my mom remembers a moment when church people came and asked about if I would go to some sort of almost like a camp thing. And my mom...
To fix you.
Yeah, but they didn't say it like that. And of course it wasn't called conversion therapy, because conversion therapy is never directly called conversion therapy. It's called something else, And she remembers, it was during a summer break, and I was obsessed with daytime TV. I loved the Rosie O'Donnell show, mainly because Judy Gold wrote on it. And I loved daytime TV. And my mom remembers saying to them, I don't know, it's part of his summer break is watching Rosie O'Donnell show. I can't take that away from him. And in a weird way, she saved me from conversion therapy because I loved the Rosie O'Donnell show. So it wasn't applauded within Mormonism. Fortunately, my family was ignorant enough to not see the signs of the bad things coming. And my mom always just sort of let me be me.
Okay, but the church didn't ostracize you.
Well, the church didn't like me. They still don't like me. I'm fine with that now. But
It must have been hard, though, as a child.
It wasn't, oddly enough, but then again, I was a weird kid who I loved being funny. I knew I could get people to laugh, and no matter if they hated me, I could still make them laugh.
Interesting.
And even though I knew I wasn't popular in my Mormon church, and I wasn't the one always being played with, and I wasn't the one that I never got invited over to any kid's house or anything, but I was fine with that because, again, I had Rosie O'Donnell. I didn't need that friend. You know what I mean? I was a weird, very oddly self-confident kid that didn't feel like that hatred or that judgment that was coming my way was a judgment on me.
Good for you. Good for you. You were lucky.
Yeah, very lucky.
Okay. H. Allen, at what point in your life do you begin to realize you're gay?
When I was baptized Mormon. It's a funny story. So when you're baptized Mormon, that you're in like a tub.
How old are you?
I was like 11 or 12, and Mormons get baptized late, and there's this tub that you're in the church. It's supposed to represent sort of a body of water, and you're in front of your entire family.
How are you dressed?
You're in a white sort of, some people do robes, some people do like white bodysuits, but you're in a white thing, and I was in a white thing with nothing else on. And remember, I'm 11 or 12, so like puberty's kicking. And there's an older man, an elder, he's called an elder, in the church. He's standing above saying all the prayers, and there's a younger missionary man holding me. This sounds like a setup for a really adult film. And there's a younger man standing behind me, holding me, dipping me into the water. Now, this younger man, the missionary, was so attractive, and he was the definition of beauty to me. And really the only reason why I agreed to even maybe get baptized was because I wanted to be in a tub with this younger man. And
is he in the tub with you?
He's in the tub with me, and he's guiding me down, and I'm being submersed in the water, and the only thing I'm thinking about as I'm in that water, I'm not thinking about Jesus or Joseph Smith or Mormonism. I'm thinking that the top of my head is inches away from what makes him a man. And I was really gay then.
Okay. And I asked you, when did you first understand that you were gay? You're 11 years old. Do you really at 11 figure this out?
You know it beforehand. I knew as a kid that something was different about me. The whole wife and kids thing was not going to happen for me, and I knew that very early on. And then when puberty hit, right around the time I was being baptized, I would have certain attractions, and I knew something was up. And yeah, I just knew. It was never, and also it was never, I was never felt to feel like I was bad in any way. I mean, my mom did a very good job of saying, you don't have to find that girl attractive. You don't have to be, like, she would always openly acknowledge the women that were attractive and the men that were attractive. And I could do the same, and it was always accepted and welcomed.
Okay, so one of the things you did not have to deal with were parents who were upset that you were gay.
No, I had to deal with, it only got weird at school. Kids make it weird, and because of their parents, obviously.
Kids can be cruel.
Kids can be cruel. Cruelty and bullying never really impacted me because I always thought I was better than them, to be honest. And I knew I was smarter than them, and I knew that I was more in tune with what culture was doing and comedy and film and all of these things, that I honestly just felt better than them. And so if they didn't like me for who I was, well, then screw you. I know other things that are funnier than you, than you know. And
okay.
Yeah.
And that's another question I wanted to ask you. At what point do you realize you love comedy and love making people laugh?
Well, there's a direct moment, and it happened at a bar mitzvah, that I knew that I could make people laugh. Like, I knew I had that gift. I didn't understand how to do it, but I knew I did. My mother had told me there was one Jew in my school, Stephen, and I got invited to his bar mitzvah. And
are you roughly 13?
Yeah, around that age, and because we were in the same grade. And my mom tells me before I leave for the bar mitzvah that they circumcised the boy at the bar mitzvah. So I was like, okay, if that's what they do, it's a religious thing. I'm not going to judge it.
Was your mother kidding you, or
yes,
she misunderstood?
She did it all the time. My mom is a huge practical joker, and she loves.
All right.
I'm very gullible as well. So anyway, she tells me that they're going to circumcise Stephen at the bar mitzvah, and I then, being the precocious kid that I was, told every one of my classmates that Stephen is about to get circumcised. Prepare yourselves, And then I psyched myself up. I told so many people that I psyched myself out, and I went to his mother and I said, "Great bar mitzvah, great party, but I'm Mormon, and I can't see Steve get circumcised." And she just looked at me like She didn't laugh. She didn't get angry. She just looked at me. She grabbed my hand and she took me to a table of women all around her age. And she said, say exactly what you just said to these women. And I did. And they all bust up laughing. It was the biggest laugh I've ever received in my life. And I was mortified, but I also loved it. Mm-hmm. And I knew that there was something there. There was something about me and how I interacted and thought and how my brain worked that made people laugh, or at least have a reaction. And yeah, and that was my first big laugh that I ever got.
And from then on?
I knew. I knew I could make people laugh. I just knew I had to figure out how to hone it, and that of course takes a long time and years of training and
now you're a pro.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm a pro,
Yes,
but I'm doing the things I got to do to make rent.
You make money.
I do make money.
That makes you a pro.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah.
By the way, just a side, you love the Golden Girls.
I have the tattoo of the Golden Girls.
Yeah, how'd that happen?
Well, I love the Golden Girls. I love B. Arthur and Estelle Getty primarily, two Jews, and I love what they represent and the writing and everything about them. They represent, in a weird way, so much of my identity because we marginalize women of a certain age as not sexual.
Yes.
Once women reach a certain age, they are no longer seen as viable for really anything other than servicing grandchildren. And it's like these women, although everyone around them said, you're a little weird. You're too much. You're this. They didn't care. They still went around and had sex and got into trouble and did all the things. And I related to it. I think a lot of gay people, queer people in general, relate to that in that being marginalized, but yet still not letting other people marginalizing you
or define you.
Define you and define who you are. And so the Golden Girls are everything.
One more question now coming back to Mormonism. Mm-hmm. There are 15 million Mormons throughout the world. It is the fourth largest church. It sees itself as an inheritor of Christianity.
Yes.
Okay. And most non-Mormons know nothing about it. Even if they've seen the Book of Mormon on Broadway, they know nothing about it. But there are stereotypes. Mm-hmm. One is about polygamy, and one is about racism.
Yes.
Speak to me about that from your experience as a Mormon growing up from most of your young life.
Well, the polygamy thing is pretty easy to explain away. That's BS. That is not a part of the modern Mormon, the mainstream Mormon identity. And just like within Judaism, there are sects of Jewish people that do very extreme things in different communities that the mainstream Jewish community doesn't necessarily agree with. Also within Mormonism, there are people who do things that call themselves Mormons that aren't in line with mainstream Mormonism or doctrine within Mormonism. I'm basically thinking of like FDLS, fundamentalist Mormons, who the one who a couple years ago got sent to prison because he had all those 20 wives and he was leading his own and he had been excommunicated from the church. So this polygamous thing is sort of hogwash.
Yes, and I want to emphasize, since 1890, it has been outlawed by the Mormon Church.
Yeah, they were a little late to it, but they did it.
Well, Brigham Young had 55 wives, and that was a model.
Can you imagine having 55 wives?
That's silly.
And how did not a husband sneak in there? You know what I mean? One husband to at least like lay off a little bit of the work. One dude has to do the work for 55. No.
Okay. So one thing we take off the table is this idea of polygamy.
The racism thing is very potent, and I of course am a white person, and I definitely never want to speak for people of color, especially Mormon people of color, because I'm sure their experiences are definitely more nuanced and they have more information. But that said, it is disgraceful that a church essentially sort of banned people of color until 1978 when they famously did the rule change. And the fact that even in certain, you look within church leadership, and of course I haven't been to a Mormon church in 20 years now, so I hope things have changed. I doubt they have, but there are very few people of color in church leadership positions, and that's a problem. But you could also say the same thing about Judaism. There's very few within sort of like, there is a large presence of people of color rabbis in the world, sure, but if you look at the percentage of it, it's probably not as large as we would hope it would be. And
I'm not sure, Bowie, you may be right that there's an analogy.
Yeah.
By analogy, I mean, if it is no more unusual for there to be few blacks, African Americans, in the Mormon Church, because it just isn't. It isn't organic. In the Jewish
The
community,
circumstances is different.
in the Jewish community, there's no prohibition
Yes,
about
exactly.
a black being anything, and we have Ethiopian Jews,
And the same
we have
within
we have
Mormonism.
Jews who are Yemenite, and all
Exactly.
the Sephardic community. So there is Jews of color absolutely exist, and there's no ban. So I don't feel
Well,
it's
but there's
fair.
no ban. There's no ban within Mormonism.
Then what's
either
the
anymore.
issue?
But the issue is that also within Judaism, the difference between Mormons and Judaism is that Mormons quite certainly proselytize. That's the foundation of often the church. Jews do not do that.
Correct.
Jews do not go out and seek people to join. And when Mormons do that, of course they're going into countries looking at people of color
Absolutely.
to greater their numbers, but they're not in positions of leadership. And also, you're right. Within the Jewish community, there are definitely, African Jews, and they're prominent communities. But prominent Jews of color are kind of hard to find in many
Yes,
situations.
but it's not because they've been excluded.
True, but
It's just
if
not
we,
something.
if
It's
we
not something.
open up the fold to
No, it's not. But any person of any color.
is welcome within Judaism.
And they can become a rabbi.
Mm-hmm.
There's no rules against it. There's no social stigma to it. They don't. But if nobody wants to,
Mm-hmm.
it's different than saying, well, there's a group that in some way is making a policy decision that makes it harder for someone of color.
Possibly within Mormonism, even though it isn't explicitly banned. But sort of going back to even the point of the film is that in order to strengthen the Jewish community, we have to let all voices rise within the Jewish community and allow Jewish voices, diverse Jewish voices, to rise. And I think, if you even look within politics of Israel, there's a deep discussion about diversity within Judaism and within the leadership within Israeli positions, and letting voices of color, letting voices of different sexual orientations, different genders even, have positions not only of leadership, but also to have a strong voice within the community and to be leaders within the community. There is a movement for that within Judaism. There's a very strong movement with that within Judaism, and I think...
And we do know that Tel Aviv is a home.
It's true, but it's still very dangerous to be a transgender person in Tel Aviv. And certain understanding needs to be taken for these communities because they are more marginalized within society and they are more statistically victims of violence, domestic violence. You look at the murder rate. I don't know the murder rate of Israel, but you look in America and you look at the murder rate of transgendered Americans, and it often is through either discrimination or it's through relationship violence, domestic violence. And those are discussions that need to be had.
Yes.
And if we don't sort of recognize, I'm all about praising communities who are doing great work. But I also think I don't want to be the biggest fan, because I think when you become the biggest fan and you drink all of the Kool-Aid, then sometimes we lose sight on people who are hurting. And not everything is always great, and which is a reality in life. But I also think it's important to recognize those people who are struggling or who maybe don't have a voice that isn't a part of the majority, and to hear that voice and see how that voice impacts the greater majority.
Yes, and I will only say just a touch differently.
Yeah.
We do not live in a messianic world.
No.
There is injustice, and there's suffering, and there's inequality, and there's poverty, and that is the world. And the question for me is, not has a society eliminated it all, but what is the vision, and what is the goal, and are they moving towards that goal?
I think it's the responsibility of the majority to recognize that some communities are more at risk of being discriminated against, and it is the responsibility of the majority to then somehow take ownership for why that's happening, because it is partly because of the majority, and that they have a responsibility in fixing it. It's just like, what a lot of my friends who are activists within the Black Lives Matter movement and all these other movements, that it's not, black people didn't create racism. People of color didn't create racism.
Any
White
more than
people.
Jews created
Exactly.
anti-Semitism.
And it is up to the people who created this problem to then address the problem in ways that we can.
Of course.
And so that's why I think, lifting marginalized communities and recognizing that just like within Mormonism there is a race problem, just like within Judaism there is a gender problem, and there's a gender imbalance within many communities in terms of leadership and in terms of the roles of women in certain communities.
It's not the same.
It's
and
not.
when you put them in the same
It's
sentence,
not the same, but I'm saying
there are people who are going to think
of
you
course.
think that the way certain communities deal with blacks is how Jews deal with women.
No, there's not. It's not a comparison of equal value, but I also don't think it's responsible to just assume that that's the assumption, because, if we have the discussion, and if, of course, I'm coming from my own learned experience of the
Sure.
community I came from and then the community that I'm in now, and recognizing that my learned experience shows that there are warning signs for how we treat women, how we treat people of color, how we treat people of different sexual orientations. And if we don't recognize those warning signs and the imbalances that exist within those communities, then we're doomed to repeat problems and to continue to have problems until they're addressed. And so we can go the drastic route and say that, a simple example of two communities and problems that they may share within certain communities is of equal balance, sure, because we don't want to be compared to people we don't like, of course. And I agree with that. But at the same time, I also think it's very sobering to recognize that even though it isn't a direct comparison, it still works to show a spotlight on some problems that might exist and to address them.
If you're saying, are there problems having to do with women in the Jewish community? There's no question there are.
Yeah.
And the Jewish world is very aware of it.
But yet women in the Jewish world are allowed to be rabbis and are allowed to...
The overwhelming Jewish community treats women now exactly as they treat men.
And that is not like what happens with Mormonism,
That's-
because Mormonism doesn't allow women into positions of leadership, and they're hoping to change that, but as of now, they haven't changed that.
Okay.
And there is that's a very different situation. However, it's still a problem within Judaism. And
It is a problem. It is a problem, but it has to be seen in perspective and in
of course,
context.
but I also think comparing the two and just allowing that, it's not, when you're discussing these things and you're asking questions of, what's the problem within Mormonism, I'm going to be able to make comparisons between
Well,
the
there's
two.
no comparison.
But there's no,
There is no between the black issue in Mormonism
Yeah.
and the female issue in Judaism. There is no comparison.
well, no, there's
at
no
all.
comparison to those two things because they're two separate communities. But if we look at examples of how other communities are doing injustices, perhaps we can see ways that not only how we can do better, but also how we can not go in the direction.
Absolutely right. I agree with you 100%. Okay, so now the most interesting part of your journey.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which one?
At one, for me, and for L'chaim, at one point, you say to yourself, either I'm not comfortable with Mormonism and being a Mormon, and there's something about this Jewish thing, and I don't even know how much you knew about it when you began
Yeah.
to feel this way, that attracted you. And ultimately, that starts a journey of its own that leads to, when you're 31 years old, you convert to Judaism.
Yeah.
I want to know that journey, how it begins, were there problems, were there obstacles, and then, and part of the film
Yeah.
shows you with teacher and some of the people I know. But I want to hear from your perspective. How does that happen to you?
Oh, it didn't happen quickly. There never really was a moment where I was like, I'm no longer a Mormon. It didn't happen like that. It happened gradually. I never really identified with anything they were saying, and so
When you say anything they were saying, meaning like what?
the religious doctrine of Judaism or of Mormonism never really impacted me. I think you could easily say I stopped being Mormon the day I was baptized Mormon. It's
Interesting.
just, it's sort of like what we do a lot of times as we're kids, and I think Jews also especially can agree with this, that you are just sort of what your family tells you
Of
you
course,
are.
right.
And as a kid, you just do the things your family does because it's what your family says you are. But what I think a lot of more marginalized people, particularly I think queer people in general, have is that what society says you are as a child and what you're supposed to be defined by the values of your family doesn't necessarily become the person you are, because you know there's something innately inside of you that says that's not you. And
So are you saying there's something about inside you that said, I'm not, this Mormon thing is not who I am?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. There were questions that I had that aligned with Jewish faith in terms of the afterlife that I didn't really understand. You know, within Mormonism, there was lots of talk about the afterlife, of course, and sort of heaven and all those things. And I never really understood why there was such a focus on that within Christianity. That seems like a waste of time to me, and I hate wasting time. And so it really did feel like the Christianity in a lot of ways was like living your life like you're about to win the lottery. You know what I mean? Like if you do these things and you only do these things, then you will definitely win the lottery, which is heaven. And that seems like a waste of time to me. And so I didn't understand it. I thought the now, the present, the community I'm in, the life that I'm living, that's the most important thing. You know, the community that I serve and the life that how I'm giving back to the community and my role in all of it. And that seemed more important to me. And it wasn't until college, I went to DePaul University in Chicago, that because I mean, I had emulated through performers like B. Arthur, Bette Midler, my stand-up act became very Jewy without me knowing that it was Jewy. You know what I mean? I didn't understand, but yet the way I grew to be a performer, it became very Jewish. And I remember I was going home for like the holidays, and or for some weekend thing, and my counselor asked if I was going home for the High Holy Days, and I had no idea what she was talking about. And then she gave me books to read, and as the years after college, and I started reading more, and I started talking with more Jews, I started realizing that those questions I had when I was a kid about the afterlife and all of that align within the Jewish faith. And so I assumed I'll marry a Jew one day once the government gives me that legal right. Thanks. And yeah, and that was what I thought. Yeah.
So you begin studying roughly at what age?
Well, studying, just reading.
Reading.
My late teens, like 19.
Okay.
Yeah, 18,
Okay.
19.
Okay. And you spent 4 years at...
And then after that, I kept reading. I just kept, and I was around Jews all the time too. I mean, comedy is a very Jewish thing. Yeah. So I was around Jews for a lot, and I worked in politics for a while, and I worked for Jewish candidates, and I moved to New York eventually after Chicago, which, I mean, if you live in New York for any period of time, you're basically kind of Jewish anyway. But my existence in New York was also very Jewish, and so much of the community and my people in the community were Jewish, and it just was very Jewy. And
you were comfortable.
I was very comfortable,
Yes.
and it made sense. And I remember I'd have to go speak, when I worked in politics, I had to go speak to synagogues and stuff on behalf of the candidate, and it was
Who were you representing?
at that time I was working with Anthony Weiner.
Okay.
That was the primary thing. Also Hillary Clinton for a bit. And I would go to these synagogues and these different Jewish organizations, and I would talk to people, and I just got along with all the Jews. I was able to communicate, even though I am this, I dress weird, and I look weird, and I'm this gay guy, and I don't fit in really anywhere I go, which I am fine with. And I still fit in there.
Yes.
It was
Yes.
I was able to sort of have that communication and that dialogue. So it just felt very natural. And I honestly just thought I would marry a Jew someday. Yeah.
Did you?
No, I didn't. I didn't at all. In fact,
okay.
I got in a
okay.
relationship with a Mexican, like with a Catholic Mexican. He's not Catholic. He's born Catholic, but he's not really Catholic.
He's not a practicing.
Yeah, he's not
right.
practicing. And he's basically Jewish now too, for the amount of screenings and Jewish things he has to
I
go
bet
to.
he is.
He knows
bet
more
he-
about
right.
Judaism than probably some Jews at this point.
All right.
Yeah.
So now you're reading.
Yeah.
And you're comfortable in the Jewish community, and you're in New York.
Doing comedy.
You're doing comedy. And
moved to LA.
You're having fun, right?
I'm having so much fun. I'm so broke, and I'm living in a room that's 5 by 11.
Is that true?
Yeah, I lived with 4 other straight guys. It was a very weird experience. And
In L.A.?
in New York. And I was just doing the thing. I was
Okay.
just, you know.
But at some point now, you say to yourself, no, I want this to be formalized. I want in some way.
Well, something
to at
big
least-
happened before that.
What?
Cancer. Cancer happened before
Okay.
that. So I moved to Los Angeles when I was 30 for a job, and I figured I would just move there. You know, I wasn't officially living there, And then about 2 weeks after I had gone there to start this job, I had a pain, and then I went to my friend's doctor because I didn't have a doctor there, and then it turned out that he needed. They thought it was bad, and so they had to have surgery. And within a month, I started chemo, and then that was my year. And that was sort of, it all just kind of shifted then. And it was in that period, and a lot of people think, oh, you got cancer, you converted to Judaism. Like they want to make the simple comparison of boom, boom. And it's not, there's a lot in the gray area. And for me, it wasn't necessarily that I thought I was going to die and I wanted to convert to Judaism and that storyline that people really want to make. It really was, I had a lot of free time. Like, cancer gives you a lot of free time because you don't have to work. I mean, I didn't have to work. And you have time. And I at the end of chemo, I decided to start the conversion process. And I went to a few temples in LA that I didn't really jive with. And then my psychiatrist.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to make sure people hear you.
Okay.
It wasn't that it was causative.
No.
But it gave you an opportunity to think beyond illness, for that matter.
Yeah.
And think, what do you want to be?
It was
yes,
more.
but how are you now?
I'm fine.
Mazel
Yeah,
tov. That's
thank you.
wonderful. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, so you have a successful treatment, and now you are at the other side. You've had all this time to think, to read, and you decide what?
Well, I decide fundamentally that I wasn't going to wait for somebody to make me what I know that I am. You know what I mean? I had never done that in my life. I had never, ever waited for anybody to tell me how I was supposed to be something that I knew that I was. So why was I waiting for someone else to make me a Jew? That seems stupid. And
You somehow felt you were a Jew?
oh, I knew I was Jewish.
You knew.
I've been-
What is-
I-
oh, wait. H. Allen, that's so interesting. Describe, what does that mean when somebody says, I wasn't born Jewish, I was born Mormon, lived my whole, but I knew I was a Jew. What do you mean?
It means I was always Jewish. I mean, everything about me and my thought process and my community and who I align myself with and how I've evolved into the adult man that I am, you know, the person that I am is Jewish. My brain is Jewish. My thought process is Jewish. My reactions to things is Jewish. Everything is Jewish. And so I was always Jewish. I just had to sign the document.
Okay,
you know?
it is so interesting to hear you say this.
Yeah.
It's also sort of thrilling to hear you say this. But you mean something, and you're assuming the audience understands what you mean. And I want to push you to actually articulate, I felt Jewish, my thinking was Jewish, my attitudes were Jewish.
Yeah.
What is that? What are you referring to?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because many Jews are struggling with the very issues that you're raising, which were instinctive to you.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to try to define for our audience, when you say, I thought Jewish, I felt Jewish, what are you talking about?
Well, I think my Mormon upbringing actually had an impact on me finding out that I'm Jewish. In that, when you're told as a kid that you are this thing, this is who you are. There's no question about it. This is what your family is. This is what you are. And I called BS on that very early, obviously, because I didn't turn out straight, didn't turn out Mormon. Like, none of those things worked. I didn't stay home near my mom and take a job locally. I left really quickly. And I didn't do the things that everyone said you're supposed to do. And I don't know if that's a gay thing or if that's just me being weird thing. I don't know. But I was in tune with who I was at a really early age. And I felt comfortable with who I was. That's not to say I always felt comfortable, but I felt like I at least knew who I am, you know, in a lot of ways. And I just didn't have the language to put to it. I needed the language. And just like how I always knew I was gay, but I didn't have the language for what that meant, the same with Judaism. It was always there. I just didn't have the language to apply to it. And once I got that language, I answered my questions, you know?
Give me an example. I know it's hard, but give me an example. Yeah. What about you has been Jewish your whole life, you just didn't know how to express it? What do you love? What did you love about Jewish, which you feel is?
Well, food's great. No. It's just there. It's who I am. it's fundamentally who I am. And yes, I could cite, I'm sure I could answer your question by citing something that I've read or an experience
Only
that
if
I've
it's
had,
honest. Only
but
if it's
it wouldn't
honest.
be honest.
Yeah,
Because the
right.
honest reaction is, I know that I'm Jewish. Everything that I've read, everything that I've done, every learned experience that I've had has been dictated by either a Jewish reaction based on however you want to define Judaism. To me, Judaism is defined by community and giving back to a community that is larger than you. It's not about you, it's about community and what you do to give back to that community. And fundamentally, what I needed at that moment in my life was, in chemo, was I needed a connection to something greater than who I am. And even though I always knew, after getting the language for it, always knew that I was Jewish, it wasn't a moment that made me realize that I was Jewish. It was just sort of always there. It's about being a part of something greater than myself. It's real easy for me to make everything about me. And I think it's important to a person to realize that you're a part of something greater than yourself.
And that's not the way Mormons look at life?
Well, I can't speak to that. I don't know, because I'm not Mormon. And I never really was, even though the labels were all there. I'm sure it is, but I also don't think we have that much, there's not that many differences between people. And fundamentally, I think we are all the same. Everyone, the Mormons, Jews, Catholics, we are really all the same. And it's just how the languages that speaks to us on how things are described of how you live your life, it's what you feel best represents you. And why you feel that, who knows? But it's there, and you feel something. And for me, I feel something with the Jewish community. And so I'm going to respond to that and follow it, and not just say, oh, well, I'm Mormon, so I can't follow that. Because that wouldn't be authentic to me and who I am.
If I said to you that Judaism is an embrace of life, a certain perspective on of what this universe means and where the human being is, and what fundamental truths are more important than any other, but it's an embrace of life. And some people call it a philosophy. Philosophy to me is too limiting. Judaism is larger. Torah is larger than a philosophy. There's a philosophy, however, inside Torah, and there's a philosophy inside the embrace of life that is Judaism.
Yeah.
And you and I understand. There are Jews who are the loveliest of people, and there are Jews who are crumb bums.
Of course.
And that's true of every community.
Yeah.
It's not about that. The question is, what is the overall vision and goal and inspiration of any community? And so what excites me enormously about being Jewish, and luckily I was born Jewish, but I always think to myself, if I hadn't, if you and I were growing up as kids together, we'd be making this journey together.
Yeah.
Okay. But what excites me, and what I try to articulate whenever I'm teaching, whether it's on JBS or in the Chavurah or in lectures all over the country, I'm trying to articulate the genius of a Jewish tradition that has at its core a unique, in its totality, embrace of life. It's not that other religions don't share pieces.
Of course.
But in its totality, each religion has its own unique perspective.
Yeah.
And what excites me as a Jew, as somebody who has given this, I think about this all the time.
Yeah.
What excites me is the way in which the Jewish tradition has put it all together, and then asks me to be the best I can possibly be as both a Jew and a mensch, and in essence, they should be the same.
Yeah.
Okay, and I could articulate for you the things that excite me about that embrace of life, whether you call it a philosophy or a religion. I could articulate some of the things that make me so excited. are there any things about the embrace of life that is particularly Jewish,
Yeah.
which excites you?
Community value of coming together on Shabbat and realizing that, sure, you've had a week, but it means the being together in that moment, in that either Friday night or Saturday, whenever you do it, and even if it's just something as simple as, my boyfriend and I casually going out to dinner on on a Shabbat night, and just putting work aside and putting it all aside and having that moment of being together with the people that make up the community that you call your life. And I think in many ways, community is my life, and you saying that it's a celebration of life, and I think that is 100% correct. And for me, my community and the community that I choose to belong to and I choose to continue to support, because I think a lot of times I get asked, why did you convert to Judaism? And
I'm sure.
And I tell people that is way too complicated of a question just to casually answer at a 7-Eleven on a Thursday. It's been asked. And I say to them, because oftentimes it's Jews who ask this, I ask, why do you choose Judaism? Because you might have been born into it, and that's great. And you were lucky to be born into it, I feel, because I want you to be Jewish. But you still continue to choose it.
Absolutely.
Every single day, Jews continue to stay Jews. You have, reservation to not be a Jew anymore. You have reservation to not align yourself with either Jewish faith or the Jewish community or Jewish philosophy or whatever you align with. And I have actively chosen to follow my authentic self, which I then use the language to say I am Jewish. That is the language I know. And I think it's important for born Jews to also acknowledge why they choose to identify as Jewish and to be Jewish. And you could say it's just who you were born in, but that's an easy answer. Just like you were pushing me before. That is not an appropriate answer, because you're an adult. You're an adult. You don't do things. You can be who you are. And my friend, I have a good friend, he's in the film, Elliot Glazer, he was born Jewish. He's from Long Island here, great Jewish family here. And he says, he kind of stopped sort of being Jewish after his Bar Mitzvah. He just sort of did the thing, and he didn't, the dogma and the sort of the problems that he had with just sort of the structure of temple life and all of it, like he sort of stopped being Jewish. And then it was through my conversion and through my sort of becoming an active Jewish person in the community, giving speeches, doing things, that now he's the one texting me about going to shul, and I'm like, I'm traveling, I'm working, I can't right now. But he's the one coming to me asking to go to this thing or this Shabbat thing or whatever. And I love that, because it really shows that you can choose to be whatever kind of Jew you want to be. Fundamentally, the most important thing is for you to be Jewish. And if you feel that you can be the best Jew you can be by casually going to a Shabbat on Friday nights, then be that Jew. If you want to go all in and be a rabbi, then definitely be that Jew. But you can be the Jew you want to be, but you still choose to do it. And I think it's important for all Jews to really wonder why they just choose to be Jewish.
So at some point now, you are going to begin the conversion process.
Yeah, I started at the end of chemo, and it was about a year, maybe a little under a year.
Who do you reach out to?
Well, I went to a few different temples in Los Angeles, but I didn't really find any that jived with me. And then, because it wasn't so much anything against the temples, it was just, I just didn't get it. And then I went to my psychiatrist. This is the most LA thing ever. I went to my psychiatrist and I expressed my reservations of sort of my struggles with finding a temple to convert with and a rabbi. And then she was like, oh, you should go to this great rabbi. He's gay, but the temple isn't necessarily gay. And Rabbi Zach Shapiro of Temple Akiba in Los Angeles, Culver City. And I went and I met with him, even though it's very far from my apartment. It's literally an hour drive from my apartment, which in LA terms means it could basically be Wyoming. And I went and I met with him, and we had, again, I want to say, people ask, what was that connection like, and give a reason for why it connected, but it just connected. And I think in a lot of ways it connected because Rabbi Zach saw that fundamentally my soul is Jewish, and I just needed the language to explain it, and he got it.
What was your ceremony like? Who was
Which
there?
one?
Conversion.
Oh, it was very private, which is very much in line with me, because I don't have family in Los Angeles, and I have close friends that are like family, and they're my chosen family. But I intentionally wanted it to be, because Rabbi Zach is so important to me, and Temple Akiba is so important to me, and everything that they've done for me, and they're featured in the film, of course, that they're my family.
Yes.
And so I wanted it to be just them.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, you then chose to have a bar mitzvah ceremony.
Yes, in a very sort of roundabout way. Surprising to a lot of people, but I'm not a people person, and I'm not. I don't.
Oh, you are a people person.
I mean, I'm good on one-on-one, but I don't crave parties, and I don't crave. I mean, when I'm on a stage, I'm talking. You're not talking back, and so it's like being alone. And so I don't like it. But when I did choose, I was thinking of doing just sort of a Temple Akiba thing, something small, private. And then I met the director of the film, Eliza Rosen, because I was pitching another project that had nothing to do with anything Jewish. And she saw I was wearing a Star of David necklace, and she pushed me like a good pushy Jew would. And she said, "You're not Jewish. Why are you, appropriating this culture?" And I was like, "No, I am Jewish." And I told her my story. And she instantly, everything started going.
So that's how the film comes to be.
And she asked if I ever wanted to have a bar mitzvah. And I said, well, yeah, probably something small at Temple Akiba. And she was like, no, you have a voice, there's a message here, we have to do something with this. And I was like, well, if you see it, then let's do it. And so within a month, we started filming, and it kind of happened.
And the bar mitzvah was in some way part of that film?
Yeah, so the idea, for me, it was important because I wanted to explore what kind of Jew I'm supposed to be, my role within the community and my purpose within the Jewish community. And I wanted to really explore that before my bar mitzvah. And the film gave me an opportunity to travel and talk with Jews all around the world to explore what it means to be Jewish right now, but more importantly, what it means for me what role I have in giving back to the Jewish community and the role I'm supposed to play. And then we used the bar mitzvah at the end as sort of like a goal for me to figure that out. I think
There's a moment, you say the Shema, holy in the Torah.
Yeah.
We see some of the party. It looked like a wild party.
It was pretty fun. Yeah, it was fun.
You also end up going to Israel.
Yes.
What was that like for you?
Incredible.
Because?
Israel is, well, I'll give a little history lesson here. Missourians love Israel for a very non-Israeli reason. Harry Truman. So Harry Truman, Missourian, he is if you're a learned Missourian, if you're an educated Missourian, you know to respect and love Harry Truman. And I was a big Harry Truman, I'm a big history buff, and I was a big Harry Truman fan as a kid. And I would insist that whenever we were going to visit family in the Kansas City area of Missouri, that we had to go to Independence, Missouri and stop by the Harry Truman Library so I could see the library. And there's a whole section in the library of, a Torah that he has, and because of his role in the founding of Israel in 1948, and everything he did in that time period. And that was one of his greatest achievements, he felt, was being able to ensure the sovereignty of Israel. And so, as a Missourian, that's how I knew about Israel. And then, of course, now as a Jew, Israel became something much deeper, and it was great to go and to experience life in a Jewish life in a totally different way, because they don't get why I converted, which I find very funny. Israelis in general don't hold back, especially Israeli Jews. And whenever we were there filming, and I would say what the film was about, the response always would be like, well, why would you do that? Why would you convert? That's stupid. Because they're so secular, and they so don't get why, but it's culturally it's different in the United States than it is in Israel. So it was great filming in Israel. I've been to Israel many times now, and I love Israel.
Okay. So what's next for you? And I'm asking, in some ways, it's not even a fair question, but I'm asking it in two dimensions at the same time. Mm-hmm. I want to know about what's next for you in terms of this career you're building, and you have been very successful. And what is
moderately?
Well, maybe you'll be more successful even now.
After this interview,
exactly right.
Explode.
And what's your future? What do you see for the next stage
Yeah.
in the Jewish journey for you?
Well, as anyone who's had cancer before will tell you, you don't think too far ahead, because when you do that, you get disappointed. And I'm very much cancer. One of the biggest blessings I got from cancer was that I'm able to truly focus on the now and do what feels right now, and not have a big long-term plan. Not because I'm scared of anything happening, but because I think I don't like plans, and I don't think they're healthy. And so for me, what I found out in the filming of doing Latter-day Jew is that my role as a Jew, my purpose as a Jew and as a comedian, is to use my voice to communicate my own point of view. And in doing that, then hopefully other Jews can relate, or maybe they can celebrate the Jews that they are, or maybe they can think about something in a different way, or they can challenge me, or whatever. But my role as a Jew is to use my voice. It's the only thing I'm good at. I've been fired from a lot of jobs, and the only thing I'm good at is talking. And so if I just continue to talk and experiencing things and sharing my experiences and entertaining and living my life, that's my goal. That's fundamentally all I want to do, is to be able to entertain people, to make people laugh, and to maybe make people think. That's it. Thank you.
You are wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much.
You are courageous and you're lovely, and it's been a real honor meeting you. I wish you, in Hebrew it said, Kol tuv v'hatzlacha, only goodness and success as you continue on, H.
Thank you.
And you're always welcome here.
I can't believe I didn't call you Rabbi for the whole hour. Isn't that crazy? I tried. I struggled.
You did
I wanted
very
to.
well. You
I wanted
did
to.
very well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
H. Alan Scott, who was raised in a Mormon family and then at age 31 converted to Judaism. Alan's story is told in a wonderful documentary entitled Latter-day Jew. I hope you enjoyed meeting Alan and that you've learned something from his own personal story. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to any of the ideas expressed on this edition of L'Chaim. And remember, you can now take L'Chaim with you wherever you go. We are a podcast. So wherever you download your podcast, download L'Chaim, also in the news, and you can listen to programs like this one with H. Alan Scott. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'Chaim, my friends, to life.
L'Chaim is a presentation of Jewish education in media.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.